Bloodsport, the true Kumite. Rain hammered the windows of my father's apartment the night he finally told me the truth. Not the tabloid version, not the Hollywood version, not the lies wrapped in magazine interviews and martial arts mythology. The truth. My father sat in silence for a long time before speaking. His hands, scarred, heavy-knuckled, old fighter's hands, rested on a faded black duffel bag. The same bag he had carried through Hong Kong in 1975. Inside it was proof that the Kumite had existed, and proof that another man stole his story. Most people know the name Bloodsport. They know the tournament, the underground fights, the death matches, the dimly lit arena beneath Kowloon City. And they know the name Frank Dux. My father spat when he heard it. Coward never even fought there. I was 16 the first time he said that. At the time, I laughed. Everybody knew the stories. Secret military operative, undefeated Kumite champion, world records, assassins, black belts. But my father didn't laugh. He walked into his bedroom and returned with an old photograph. 4 men stood in front of a ferry dock in Hong Kong. One was Japanese, one looked Brazilian, one wore an eye patch, and one was my father. In the background, almost hidden beneath cigarette smoke and harbour fog, stood a younger Frank Dux, not a fighter, a spectator. You have to understand what Hong Kong was then, my father told me. Not the tourist version, the real city. Back then, Kowloon Walled City was still alive. A vertical labyrinth of concrete sickness. No sunlight reached the lower corridors. Water dripped constantly from rusted pipes overhead. Rats moved like shadows through alleys barely wide enough for 2 men to pass. The Kumite hid there because nowhere else on earth could contain it. No police, no laws, no witnesses willing to talk. The fighters came from everywhere. Karate masters from Osaka, Muay Thai killers from Bangkok, Savate fighters from Paris, Sambo wrestlers from the Soviet Union, American brawlers looking for money or glory, and men who simply wanted permission to hurt someone without consequence. My father had entered under another name, El Toro, not because he was Spanish, because once he moved forward, he never stopped. Before the Kumite made him a legend whispered about in dockside bars and underground gyms, my father had another name, Mateo Vargas, but almost nobody remembered that anymore. To fighters across 3 continents, he became known as El Toro, the bull, not because he was reckless, because pain never stopped him. My father was born in 1948, in a poor district outside Malaga. His father worked cargo ships. His mother cleaned hotel rooms for British tourists. Violence surrounded him early. Knife fights outside taverns. Drunken sailors smashing bottles across each other's faces. Smugglers moving through the docks after midnight. By 13, my father had already broken another boy's jaw in a street fight. By 15, local boxers refused to spar him. He possessed something trainers fear, not aggression, calmness. He never fought angry, never shouted, never celebrated. He simply kept moving forward. At 17, Mateo disappeared from Spain. His mother believed he'd joined merchant shipping. The truth was darker. He enlisted in the French Foreign Legion under a false name. The Legion in the late 1960s was full of ghosts, runaways, political extremists, mercenaries, men hiding from prisons, wars, or themselves. That was where my father learned real combat, not sport, survival. In Algeria and later Central Africa, he learned how quickly men died when rules vanished. The Legion taught him close-quarters brutality, headbutts before punches, knees to joints, knife disarms, throat strikes, bone-breaking grapples. But it also taught him discipline. One instructor, a former Savate champion named Luke Morrow, changed my father forever. Moreau told him, strength is common, endurance is rare, but composure under violence, that makes monsters. Mateo never forgot it. After leaving the Legion in 1972, my father drifted through Europe fighting illegally for money. Marseille, Naples, Tangier, Istanbul, anywhere gamblers gathered. The underground fight world during the 1970s was enormous but hidden. Factory basements, cargo holds, abandoned warehouses, no weight classes, no doctors, sometimes no referees. My father earned a reputation after surviving 11 consecutive bare-knuckle bouts in Marseille against dock workers and ex-military fighters. That was where he became El Toro. A French gambler supposedly shouted it after watching my father continue fighting with a shattered orbital bone. All avance comme un taureau. He moves like a bull. The name stuck. The invitation arrived in Athens in 1975. A plain black envelope. No return address. Inside was a single red card stamped with a gold dragon symbol. Nothing else. No instructions. No explanation. My father already knew what it meant, because in underground fight circles, rumors of the Kumite existed like myth sailors told each other. Some said it began with samurai clans. Others claimed triads used it to recruit killers. Most believed it was fiction. Until the invitations arrived, only fighters with verified underground records received them, and only after surviving fights where death was possible. The invitation itself was terrifying, because refusing it carried consequences. The men who organized the Kumite did not appreciate disrespect. Frank Dux arrived 3 days before the tournament. According to my father, Dux wasn't a competitor. He was attached to one, a loud American kickboxer named Curtis Kane. Kane talked constantly. Dux listened quietly and watched everybody. He asked questions, my father said. Too many questions. How did invitations work? Who ran the betting? What happened when someone died? Were their records kept? The real fighters avoided him immediately. The Kumite survived through silence. Men who talked too much didn't last long. Still, Dux followed them everywhere, writing things down, memorizing stories, watching techniques. He wanted legends, my father said, not fights. Curtis Kane, the American brawler. If my father was discipline, Curtis Kane was chaos. Born in Detroit, Kane grew up amid factory collapse, gang violence, and underground boxing clubs. He fought everywhere: parking lots, bars, police athletic leagues. By 25, he built a reputation in illegal American kickboxing circuits as a brutal knockout artist with almost no defensive skill whatsoever. But he possessed charisma. Promoters loved him. Women loved him. Gamblers loved him. Kane's connection to Frank Dux began in Los Angeles during the mid-1970s. Dux floated around martial arts circles telling stories about secret ninja training and covert operations. Most serious fighters ignored him. Curtis Kane didn't, because Kane enjoyed attention almost as much as violence. The two formed an odd friendship. Kane provided legitimacy. Dux provided mythology. Frank followed Kane through tournaments, bars, and underground gyms collecting stories like souvenirs. According to my father, Kane tolerated Dux because he was useful. Dux carried bags, handled travel arrangements, took photographs, repeated Kane's legends to anyone willing to listen. But Kane never considered Dux a fighter. Too soft in the eyes, my father once said. At the Kumite, Kane lost in the second round after suffering a devastating knee injury against a Thai fighter named Prasert Noi. Dux reportedly spent the rest of the tournament avoiding direct contact with competitors, while obsessively documenting everything. When Kane later died in a drunk driving crash in Nevada in 1981, there was nobody left to contradict Frank Dux's increasingly unbelievable stories, and that was when the myth truly began. Every Kumite has one monster. In the movie version, it became Chong Li, but the real man was called Viktor Belenko, a 6'5" Soviet former military combat instructor with hands like demolition hammers. He had already killed 2 opponents before the semi-finals, not accidentally, deliberately. The arena feared him, so did the gamblers, because fear changes betting odds. My father said Belenko never celebrated after victories. He simply stood in the center of the mat waiting for the next man. Like execution was his profession. Maybe it was. The real terror of the Kumite was not Chong Li. It was Viktor Belenko. Born in Volgograd in 1942, Belenko grew up in post-war Soviet brutality. His father served at Battle of Stalingrad and raised him with military severity bordering on cruelty. By 18, Viktor entered Soviet military combat programs, specializing in sambo and close-quarter suppression tactics. According to rumors, he later worked with Soviet intelligence training security personnel and political enforcers. Nobody knew for certain, but scars covered his body. Knife wounds, burn marks, bullet grazes. Men whispered that Belenko had killed soldiers during prison riots in Eastern Europe. Others claimed he worked black market security for Soviet arms traffickers. Whatever the truth was, one thing became obvious during the Kumite. He wasn't there for honor. He was there because violence was the only thing that made him feel alive. Unlike most competitors, Belenko never socialized, never drank, never gambled. He trained alone in abandoned courtyards beneath Kowloon's neon haze, throwing elbows into hanging sacks of sand until his forearms bled. My father said watching him warm up felt like watching industrial machinery. No emotion, no humanity, just function, and perhaps the most frightening part, Belenko expected to survive. He entered the Kumite already convinced everyone else would die. The semifinals lasted 19 seconds. A Korean Taekwondo fighter rushed Belenko with spinning kicks. Belenko caught him mid-air and drove an elbow into his throat. The sound silenced the entire arena. My father still remembered it 30 years later. Not the strike, the silence afterward. No cheering, no outrage, just acceptance. The Korean fighter died before he hit the floor. That was the moment my father understood the Kumite wasn't a tournament. It was a business. Death increased wages. The championship fight took place after midnight. No music, no announcements, no ceremony. The crowd circled the platform, smoking cigarettes beneath hanging industrial lamps. My father removed his gloves and handed them to a young American standing near the edge of the arena. Frank Dux. "Hold these," he'd said. Dux nodded eagerly, like a fan meeting his hero. The fight began brutally. Belenko shattered my father's ribs within seconds, but giant men slow down, especially when they expect fear. My father fought low, destroyed the legs, hammered the knees, survived long enough for the Soviet to tire. Then came the finishing blow. Not a cinematic knockout, no spinning kick, no scream, just a short rising strike beneath the chin. Belenko collapsed backward and never moved again. The arena remained silent. My father became Kumite champion, surrounded not by applause, but by men calculating lost money. 2 nights later, Frank Dux bought my father drinks in a dockside bar. He asked for every detail. The training, the deaths, the final fight. He admired me, my father said bitterly. At least I thought he did. Dux claimed he wanted to write a book someday about underground martial arts culture. My father didn't care. Most fighters vanished after the Kumite anyway. Nobody bragged about surviving. Years later, my father walked past a cinema in London and he saw the poster. Bloodsport, a smiling American hero. The Kumite champion, Frank Dux. My father walked inside expecting fiction. Instead, he watched pieces of his own life stitched together into someone else's legend. The giant Russian, the underground arena, the secret invitations, even the black gloves, all stolen. Years later, when the world transformed the Kumite into entertainment, audiences saw heroic music, dramatic speeches, and triumphant victory. But my father remembered something else. Exhaustion, fear, the smell of blood mixed with cigarette smoke, men checking exits before sleeping. Because the real Kumite was never a martial arts tournament. It was a gathering of predators. And predators do not come together for sport. They come together to discover which one deserves to leave alive. "Why didn't you expose him?" I asked. My father smiled sadly. Who would believe me? By then the myth had become too large. Magazines repeated the stories. Martial arts schools used Dux's name for advertising. Fans wanted heroes, not truth. And the real Kumite fighters understood something important. The tournament survived because nobody talked. Breaking that silence could get old ghosts interested again. Dangerous ghosts. So my father buried it, until cancer made him realize he would die with the truth still hidden. After my father's funeral, I opened the black duffel bag. Inside were photographs, betting slips, a blood-stained hand wrap, a ferry ticket to Hong Kong dated 1975, and one final item, a Polaroid. Frank Dux standing beside my father after the championship fight, grinning like a tourist. On the back, in faded ink, were the words, "To the real champion, thanks for the stories. Frank." That was the moment I understood something horrifying. The lie wasn't accidental. He knew exactly what he was doing, and the world believed him anyway.
Sequence start. Stance geometry. Bone density. Recursive loop. Form lock. Alignment. Shift axis. Torque constant. Vector logic. Logic. Skin friction. Peak amplitude. Signal lock. Impact. Impact. Force transfer. Total output. Sequence start. Heat dissipation. Pulse drift. Residual vibration. Membrane integrity. The pattern holds. Kinetic zero. Void filled. Perfect frequency. System victory. End process.